Okay, today's daf is Masechta Sanhedrin, daf Tzadi Gimel. Again, we might go a little bit over, but not much. I'm going to try to accomplish as much as we can. We're going to start from today's 93. So Tzadik, today is daf Tzadik Gimel, and we're going to start from daf Tzadik Beis Amud Aleph and just do a little catch up. Tzadik Beis Amud Beis, and do a little catch up over here. Okay, here we go. So the Gemara is like in the middle of the page. The Gemara just said that Yecheskel also did some form of Tchias HaMesim. Yecheskel lived in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, about just before the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and after. And in the Sefer Yecheskel, it's described. In the Sefer Yecheskel, it describes that Yecheskel was Machaya Mason. He resurrected the dead. Hi, we just began, Sheldon.
Okay.
Tzadik Beis Amud Beis. So the Gemara asks the question: Man ninhu Mason Shachi Yecheskel? Who are these dead that Yecheskel resurrected? You see, in the Tanakh, it says that Yecheskel resurrected a group of people. He brought them back from the dead. Amar Rav said, Elu b'nei Ephraim. These are the people from Shevet Ephraim that lived in Mitzrayim. Shemanu l'kates v'tol. They revolted and they made a mistake and they left Mitzrayim too early. Shenema, the pasuk says, "V'nei Ephraim shesel vera b'noi v'sachas b'noi v'eloda b'noi v'sachas b'noi v'zeva b'noi shesel b'noi v'ezer v'elava hargam anshe gas hanalodim ba'aris." In Divrei Yomim, there's more of a Chronicles. It describes that they left Mitzrayim early, and they were ambushed and killed by the people of Gas. And Ksiv, and the pasuk says, "Vayis Abel Ephraim Aviyem Yomim Rabim v'Yevo Achav Lenachmai." So somehow, I don't know how, these people, these Bnei Ephraim, so you think that nobody fought and tried to leave Yitzias Mitzrayim. So now you are aware that there were people from Shevet Ephraim during the exile in Mitzrayim that left early, a little bit too early, and they were caught, ambushed, and killed. So those people were the ones that Yecheskel brought back to life. We don't know if they just got up a little bit and then they died, or they actually moved to Jerusalem and had children. Shmuel says, Elu b'nei Adam shekafra b'tchias HaMesim. These, in fact, were people who denied the concept of Tchias HaMesim. Shnema v'yoyim elai b'nei Adam atzomas v'ela kol b'Yisrael heimei hine armim yoshva atzmaseinu v'avdet tifgeseinu nigzarnu lanu. So these people were dry bones that also said they will never be resurrected, and they were resurrected. And this was a mashal that the Jews will eventually go back after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. They'll rise up again and build the second Beis Hamikdash. That was the remez. So they even though we said if you deny Tchias HaMesim, you don't get a chelik on Elam Haba. Again, they were resurrected only for a little bit to prove the point that anything can happen. Rabbi Yirmiyah says they weren't people who denied Tchias HaMesim, but they were just not from people. Elu b'nei Adam she'ein behem lachluch l'mitzvah. They never even performed even the concept of the wetness of a mitzvah. They don't know anything about anything. We find loyalenu Jews like that from Russia. Shnema atzomas yeveshes shimid dvar Hashem. So these dry bones were told to rise up. Rabbi Yitzchak Nabcha says they were people elu b'nei Adam shechipu es hehechel kuli shkatzim ramasim. They were bad vandals that they graffitied the Beis Hamikdash with designs of avodah zarah. Shnema v'ovei v'erez is called hamnes remes behema sheketz v'chol galilei Beis Yisrael mechukal hirazov. There was a lot of graffiti, so to speak, of avodah zarah in the Beis Hamikdash, the first Beis Hamikdash. Uksiv hasam v'avirani aleim saviv saviv. So the saviv of those that were raised by Yecheskel were the same people that wrote the graffiti on the walls of the Beis Hamikdash to dirty up the Beis Hamikdash, so to speak. Rabbi Yochanan says that the people that were resurrected by Yecheskel were Eilim Beisim Shebebikas Dura. These are the people that were massacred in Bikas Dura. So it's like Lahavdil, but it was like the Babi Yar of its time. What was the story of Bikas Dura, those dead people, those people were massacred in Bikas Dura. Rabbi Yochanan said, Menar Eshel Ad Rabbas, to this from place called Nahar Eshel, to this place called Ad Rabbas. That's the place called Bikas Dura, the valley of Dura. What happened there? What massacre occurred there? Shebeshah Shehegla Nebuchadnezzar Rasha Yisrael, when Nebuchadnezzar exiled the Jewish people, they were Bachurim, young kids, young men that had such a beautiful appearance that the son was embarrassed by their parents. They were so beautiful. And the women, the Babylonian women, would see them, and they would start to become all wet. Amru lebaleim, these married women said to their husband, ubaleim lemelech, and their husband said to the kings that these people are too beautiful. So tziva hamelech lahargum. So Nebuchadnezzar commanded that they should be massacred. And that the girls, looking at their massacred dead bodies, still became hot for them, so to speak. So the king commanded that they should be trampled and their bones should be, totally wiped away. So these are the, tidbits of bones that were brought back to life by Yecheskel. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Now, here we need just a little bit of an introduction that there was, in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, it was like North Korea, in Bavel, where he created statues all around Bavel, and you had to bow to the statues. Now, presumably, it was like a quasi-deity. It meant to show respect to him, but could be interpreted as that you view Nebuchadnezzar as a god. So there were people, tzaddikim, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, who were working in his, in Nebuchadnezzar's government, like together with Daniel, and they refused to bow to that idol, to that statue. So their punishment was that they were thrown into a fiery furnace, in a fiery furnace. I'm sorry, and they were miraculously saved. They were not burnt. So the Gemara says like this: Ton Rabbanan, B'sha'ah shehipo Nebuchadnezzar Rasha Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, L'ktiv Shenesh, when Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah were thrown into a fiery furnace, Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yecheskel, Lech v'hachye meisim b'bikas dura. Go, at that time, Yecheskel made the people from Bikas Dura come alive. Kevin Shehechya Oisam, as soon as they became alive, Bo Atzomais, the bones, V'tov Chuloi La'Oisar Rasha Aponav. The bones slapped the Oisar Rasha, Nebuchadnezzar, in the face. Rashi explains that they, like the Nazi Germany's, like the Nazis did, they made certain vessels from the bones of these Jewish kids, and they came alive somehow while Nebuchadnezzar was using one of these Caleb, and they slapped him in the face. Amar, so Nebuchadnezzar said, Ma tiva she'eli, who are these people? Amrulai, so they told him, Chavreim shel elu, the partners of those that are now being saved by in the fiery furnace of Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. They had a friend Yecheskel. He's Mechaya Mesa Bikas Dura. At the same time, he is resurrecting dead people from the Bikas Dura. So Nebuchadnezzar had this command of language. Pasach va'amar, he said, Asohi kamaravarim. The signs of God are tremendous. He saved Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah from the fiery furnace, and he also brought back dead bones to come alive. V'timiyei kama takifin, and his wonders are so strong. Malchusa malchus aleim, his kingdom is a kingdom forever. V'sheltine, his dominion im dar v'dar, is for generations to come. This is a pasuk in Daniel, which is, as it's not written in Hebrew, it's written like in Aramaic. And Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, Yitzchak zav roseich l'soif pigs sh'loisei rasha. Melted gold should go into the mouth of Nebuchadnezzar. She'ilimole, if he didn't, like bal malach usotrei al piv, if the malach did not come and slap Nebuchadnezzar in his mouth, Bikesh Lagan, he was so capable of poetry. Bikesh Laganis kol shiras u'shbacha she'amadava b'sefer Tehillim. He would have been able to make poetry and praises to God that would, outdo David HaMelech's Tehillim. So thank God he was stopped. That's how we don't understand what that means. He was a great person in a certain way. Tana Rabbanam, Shishin Nisan Nasabayisiyam. 10 miracles, 6 miracles happened on the day that Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah was saved from that fiery furnace. Elohei, Tzafa Kivshan, the furnace floated up so everybody can see that they were being saved. The Nifratza Kivshan, the wall of the furnace fell apart. V'humak Sudai, and somehow the line melted and started to make smoke. And killed people. It killed some of the observers, some of the officers that were observing as Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were supposed to be burning in the fiery furnace. The Nepach Tzelem Alpanav, and one of the statues fell on its face of the Nebuchadnezzar, the Nisru Arba Malchus, and as I said, 4 kings who are watching this event were burned. And at the same time, Yecheskel was bringing back the dead from Bikas Dura. The Kula Gemara, and this is all a tradition. It's not written in the Tanakh anywhere, but it's a tradition that the Chazal had. The Arba Malchias Kra, but the fact that 4 kings died, the observers in the crowd that were witnessing this event, they actually died. The Ksiv, Nebuchadnezzar Malka Shalch Minchnash Lachashtar Pinya Sagange Fachvosa Adar Gozari Raya Guduvraya the Savraya the Tifre the Choshetinam Medusai. He invited all these people to come witness. Uksiv Isim Guvrin Yohani. He told them, these are Jewish people, I'm going to throw them into the fire. Uksiv, when the story was over and the Jews, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah walked out unharmed, unburnt, but it doesn't mention these 4 kings. These 4 kings, when the event was over, it doesn't mention anything about these 4 kings. Apparently, they were burnt or they died of smoke inhalation while they were witnessing the Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah burning, so to speak, in the fiery furnace. Now, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, when they were thrown into the fiery furnace, they were like a Rebbe. If there are pictures of Rebbes that came to Auschwitz in the Auschwitz album, I don't know if you know. So there is a Rebbe there, a Papa Rebbe, something, and you can see him wearing the entire, his entire Hasidic levush with the hat on and his beketcha. As in the next second he was gassed. It's the same thing over here. The Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is teaching us, Tana Debei Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that the fact is that Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah went to jump into the fire, to the furnace. They were wearing their royal clothing. And even when you're in danger, a person should not remove your royal clothing. Then these men were bound in their mantles, their tunics, and their hats, and they went into the furnace. So this is a concept not to show that you're afraid. You go with dignity. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, we go to the Amid Aleph. Gedolim tzadikim yosim melachei sharis. Tzadikim are greater than the angels. Shnema ani va'amar ha anan chazik avraya abar shirayim halchin ben goy nuva v'chava loy is behind v'ravadi reva domei lebar eloim. When Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were burnt, so they were not burnt. So Nebuchadnezzar saw that there were 4 people in the furnace. He only threw 3 people. Apparently, the 4th one was the Malach Gabriel, who came there to save them, and he's mentioned as the last person that Nebuchadnezzar observes in the fiery furnace. So it seems that tzaddikim are greater than the Malachei Sharis, the angels from heaven, because he calls them the 4th person. When they walked out of the fiery furnace, all the nations of the world came. They slapped, so to speak, the enemies. It means the Jewish people on their face with verbally. They gave verbal abuse to all the Jews. They said to them, "You have a God that can save people from death of fire, and you can bow to a statue." At this day, we are that Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were saved from the fiery furnace, they caused all the Jews to say that God is right, and for us, we are embarrassed that we didn't have the courage to stand up. Amar Rab Shmuel bar Nachman, Amar Rab Yonasan, God wants everybody to be a hero. That's the point. Amarti ala b'sama. God says, I thought I could bring a whole date tree. I only end up bringing back a branch. Amarti ala b'sama el Yisrael. God said, I wanted all the Jewish people to be heroes over here. I would have saved all of them. I only got one branch. Now the pasuk says, Rabbi Yochanan says, there's a pasuk in Zechariah that talks about his nevuah of that time. When God saw that the Jews were bowing to this statue, and some even took it seriously. I see a vision at night. Zechariah went to sleep and he saw the vision. I saw a man riding on a red horse, which is a reference to God. He's standing between the myrtles, Asher b'Metzula, that's in the valley. Mari isi halayla, bikash hakadosh baruch hu lahavas kol hayom kuli lalayla. He saw the night. He said he saw God wanting to turn over the entire world because all the Jews were giving up hope and bowing to a statue. The Eibishter was riding, so to speak, on a horse, Al-Sus Adam on a red horse. He wanted a kulei ladam. He wanted to turn everything blood. That he saw a few great men, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. God cooled off and didn't turn the world over. God stopped from turning the world over, Bein Hadassim, because he saw Hadassim, which are Tzadikim, Asher ben Tzula in the valley. Bein Hadassim of Tzadikim, Shnema B'hi Oymen as Hadassa, Bein Metzula el Bavel, Shnema Oymen Letzula Charvi ben Arasayach Ovish. So it's a pasuk referring to Bavel. So God stopped when he saw these great Tzadikim, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, that had the courage to not bow down to the statue and risk their lives. God held up from turning over the world, and not only that, those that were full of anger became gray. Badumin, those were unread, naslevenim, became white. In other words, the horse turned white. So God's horse turned white. Amar Papa, from here you see Shema Mina. If you see Sisaya Chilbara, if you see a white horse in a dream, which is a sign of purity and courage and nobility, that's a very good dream. If a person has dreams, that's like you're getting a nevuah. If you see a white horse in a dream, that's a good sign. Says the Gemara, what happened to Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah? All we see in the Tanakh that they were few good men, and they gave their life up, so to speak. They risked their lives to make a point of not bowing to Nebuchadnezzar's statue. So what happened? Where are they now? That's always the question. Where are they now? They were heroes at their time. Amar Rav said, "Ba'ain hara mesu." They died in ayin hara. Everybody gave them an ayin hara, and they died. Ushmul Amar b'roik tavu. They sank in the spit. In other words, because of them, all the Umas Ha'olam were embarrassing Jewish people. They're saying, "Oh, you had a God save all these people. What's with you?" So, in order not to embarrass the Jewish people, they were taken. They were swallowed up and taken out of the limelight. Rabbi Yochanan says not true. All the Eretz Yisrael, they ended up moving, getting a permit to leave, immigration papers to leave Bavel, and they went to Israel. They married women, and they had children there. And it's a machlekes Tanoim what happened to Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, because all it mentions in Tanakh that they were friends of Daniel, they worked in the government, and then they were thrown into a fire and they got saved. So the machlekes Tanoim, what happened to them? Rabbi Lezer oime ba'ayin hara mesu, Rabbi Yeshua oime b'roik meis tavu, v'chacham amam ol Eretz Yisrael v'noshim v'li debanu b'boyish nema. Shema no Yeshua kohen gadol ata v'riacha yoshem v'nechet anshi moifis hema. Eizehem anoshim shenasem en moifis have oime Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. So Yeshua the kohen gadol welcome these wondrous men. Who are wondrous men? These are Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah who moved to Israel. Says the Gemara, How come Daniel was not thrown into the fiery fires? He lived in that time. He worked in Nebuchadnezzar's palace, so he should have been there and also not bound to the statue. Rav says he was on a business trip. He was sent by Nebuchadnezzar away. Lemichra Nara Rabba B'Tiberia, to dig a big river in Tiberia. Shmuel says Latuya Bizrei das pasta, to bring back alfalfa for his animals. Alfalfa is a good food for animal food. So basically, he was on the king's business trip when this test of bowing to the statue was going on. Rabbi Yochanan says Latuye Chazira de Alexandria Shemitzrayim. He brought back Nebuchadnezzar wanted the small swines from Alexandria of Egypt. They're the best in the world. So says the Gemara, how are you allowed to import that to Bavel from Egypt? Aini, Vatanya Tudis or Raifa Aimet Tudis, the doctor says, Ain part of a Chazir Yotzim Alexandria Shemitzrayim, She'ain Choitin Emshalah. The Alexandria of Mitzrayim had a lock on these type of swines, pigs, and they would not let it leave the Alexandria of Mitzrayim. You can't import it or export it from Mitzrayim unless they would cut out the womb, so you can't make more of them when you get to your locale. They wanted to have a lock on it, so they would cut out the womb of the female and then sell it to you. But anyway, it wouldn't die. That was the point. So it's not a treifa. So we see that you can't just import these pigs from Mitzrayim. So how did Daniel do that? Answers the Gemara, he was in the smuggling business. Zutra ice, he brought them when they're small, and they weren't aware that he was bringing it to Bavel. So anyway, the Gemara just got through saying that Daniel was not around during this great test when they were being tested. So Taner Rabbanim, Shloisha Hoya Ba'isa Eitza. God, 3 people were in this plan of not having Daniel around when Nebuchadnezzar was making this test. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not want Daniel around. Daniel himself didn't want to be around. Nebuchadnezzar didn't want Daniel around. Interesting. He didn't want he purposely sent him on a business trip. HaKadosh Baruch Hu HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, get Daniel out of here. The loy lamre that the people shouldn't say, b'schus say it's not sell. That you shouldn't say that because of my merit he was saved. That Chananya, Shmuel, Shavzari shouldn't say, oh, because of Daniel was with us, that's why we were saved. Daniel Amar, Daniel said, I'm leaving here because we're going to learn that Nebuchadnezzar so respected Daniel that he called him a deity. And Daniel felt that, if Nebuchadnezzar thinks I'm a god and then ends up throwing me in the fire, I'm going to get burnt, because once you're labeled a deity, God doesn't have compassion on you, and God wants the statues or their deities to be burnt in fire. Nebuchadnezzar said, I don't want Daniel here. Yazal Daniel Mahacha. Let's get Daniel out of here. The people shouldn't say that Nebuchadnezzar burns his guard in fire, because Nebuchadnezzar, for some reason, had such a fix on a crush on Daniel that he worshipped him, so to speak. How do you know that Nebuchadnezzar had a crush on Daniel, that he worshipped him as a god? When Daniel interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and he bowed to Daniel, and he wanted to, bring sacrifices to Daniel. Now the pasuk continues with another story, that there were Nevi, as you know, the first Beis Hamikdash, people didn't do tshuva because there were many false witnesses, many false prophets who said, oh, the temple will never be destroyed. Anyway, God ended up destroying the temple, but these false prophets ended up in Babylon, along with the rest of the Jews. And they tried to commit adultery, it's hard to understand, with Nebuchadnezzar's daughter. Again, they were held in high esteem. That said, in my name, they were false prophets. these people, these Nevi'ei Sheker, were ended up thrown into the fire. Nebuchadnezzar threw them into the fire and had them burnt like toasted, burned. So the pasuk says, "Asher sarfim lo nemba." Nebuchadnezzar did not burn them, but he toasted them. Ela asher kolam. In other words, Omar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon Yochai Lami, which teaches you us in kakloyes. They made them like toast. In other words, you could recognize their bodies. They were burnt, but you could still do an autopsy on them. So, like Lahavdil at the end of the war, Goebbels, Yamach Shimon, who was burnt, but they didn't have enough fuel to burn him, so they were able to identify him after the war. Now, these Nevi'ei Sheker, somehow the pasuk says that Nebuchadnezzar burnt these Nevi'ei Sheker, these false prophets, and one was name was Achav, and one was name was Tzidkiyahu. What's the story? What happened over there? These false prophets were adulterers. By Avid, what did they do to anger Nebuchadnezzar? They had such arrogance that these two Nevi'ei Sheker came to the daughter of Nebuchadnezzar. Each one said, I had a vision from God that you're supposed to sleep with my friend Tzidkiyahu. And Tzidkiyahu said, I had a vision from God, you're supposed to sleep with Achav. So, in ancient times, they believed prophets were held on a pedestal. So Azav Amr Leila Avua. So she told her father what these prophets are telling her. Amalah, he's told her Nebuchadnezzar was a smart man. He said, Eloheim Shalenu Soinizimahu. He hates adultery. When they come to you requesting to sleep with them, send them to me. When they came to her, she sent them to her father. Amalahu, he said to her, Man Amalachain. Who told you that you're supposed to sleep with my daughter? Amru, they said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God. God appears to us. So he said, I have my Jewish friends. And I asked them, would God ever send somebody to sleep with my daughter? And they said, no, it's impossible. Amrulay, so they said, in other words, we are a Navi like Hanan Yeshua of Azariah. God never told them, but God told us, and it must be true. Amalahel, so Nebuchadnezzar said, so I want to test you out to see if you're real, like Hanan Yeshua of Azariah. I'm throwing you into a fire. And this time they got scared. Amr later said, there were 3 people thrown in the fire, Hanan Yeshua of Azariah, and we're just 2, Tzidkiyahu and Achav. So he says, if you want Bachru, choose another guy and we'll throw him into the fire too. Amru Yeshua Kohen Gadol. They said, we want Yeshua Kohen Gadol, who was a tzaddik, and he lived still in Israel, but he was a tzaddik, and they felt that if they bring him to be the 3rd man to be thrown into the fire, they will not get burnt. Sabri, Leise Yeshua, the Nafshis Chusei, Umagna Lan, let's bring Yeshua, who has a lot of merits, and he's going to protect us when we're going to be thrown in the fire. Achasiu, they brought him and from Israel. Shadinu, they threw all these people into the fire. Yeshua and Kohen Gadol, Chan Achav, the false prophet, and Tzidkiyahu, the false prophet. Inu Iklu, so they, Achav and Tzidkiyahu were burnt. Yeshua Kohen Gadol, Icharuche Mane, his clothing were burnt, but he himself was not burned. Shenema, Vayreinos, Yeshua Kohen Gadol, Oimid Lefnei Malach Hashem. Uksiv, Vayem Hashem al Satan, Yiga Hashem B'cha. The Satan, God screamed at the Satan, don't you know? He's like a firebrand pulled out from the fire, that he got singed a little bit, his clothing got singed. So therefore, Yeshua Kohen Gadol was saved. And this is, by the way, is a pasuk you say every night before you go to sleep in the Krishma Shalamita. Yiga Hashem B'cha Satan. Amalei, so Nebuchadnezzar said to Yeshua Kohen Gadol, Yadata tzaddikat, I know you're a tzaddik. Why did you get burned a little bit? So they answered, right? He said, Nebuchadnezzar asked Yeshua Kohen Gadol, when I threw them into the fire, they were not burnt at all. And here, you're burnt with your little bit of your clothing. Amalei. So they answered, there were 3 people, and I'm just one person So therefore, one person thrown into fire, God doesn't save him so much. Avram was thrown into a fire by Nimrod, and he was totally saved. Nothing was burnt. Awesome. When Avram was thrown into the fire, he was the only one thrown in the fire, so God saved him. So the fire could not touch him. I was thrown into the fire with Achav and Tzidkiyahu, who were Rishoyim. So therefore, so there was permission for the fire to start burning. So I also got caught up into it, and I got burnt a little bit. That's what people say. You throw two dry logs into a fire. And one is very saturated with water. The dry wood is going to cause a fire to the saturated log with water. So that's once you're with bad company, you get burnt as well. But the Gemara wants to know really, why was Yeshua Kohen Gadol's clothing burnt? Okay, we're going to stop in like 4 minutes. My Tami Ianish, why did he get punished? Amar Rapapa said, Rapapa said that Yeshua Kohen Gadol had nice children, but they married inappropriate women, and he didn't say anything. And a father, when he sees his children doing something, he should protest or do something. Yeshua was wearing dirty clothing. Was Yeshua the type of person to wear dirty clothing? He was a Kohen Gadol. This teaches you they would marry women that were not appropriate to be the wives of Kohanim. He didn't say anything. So therefore, he got punished. I'm not sure if I would be able. You have to be a certain courage, a certain parent to be able to say that, to say something to your kid. Amar Abtamchem. Abtamchem said, Darish bakapar b'tzibari. Why does it say Sheisha Sarim Eli Nosali? Boaz gave Rus 6 pieces of barley. My Sheisha Orim. What do you mean he gave Rus 6 pieces of barley? Ile Sheisha Orim Mamish, he gave her 6 barley pieces. Does he give such a little gift? 6 pieces of barley. Ella Sheisa'in, he gave the 6 pounds of barley. Can she carry so much? Ella Ramaz Law Ibaya said a hint. We got on Ahmed Bays. Shasidin Shisha Bonam Leitzis Memeno Shemizbarchim B'Sheish Brachos, that there's going to be 6 offsprings coming from Rus, and each one of them is going to be blessed with 6 blessings. Ve'eluhem David, Mashiach, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. David, Mashiach, and Daniel, and Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah all come from Rus. David, the Ksiv, how do you know? And each one of them were blessed with 6 praises. David, the Ksiv, Vayan Echad Men HaNa'orem. David, it says they had 6 special characteristics about him. The Pasuk in Shmuel says that Shaul HaMelech got into a depression, and they told him, you have to get somebody who knows how to play the harp. So this Doeg said, I see there's a good guy you should hire. He named Isi, I see Ben Yishai, Beis Alachmi. There's a son to Yishai from Beis Lechem. Yedea Nagin, he knows how to make music. The Gibar Chayil, the Ish Machama, Unavoin Dovar, he has tremendous insight. The Ish Tayar, he's a handsome person. The Hashem Imoy, and Hashem is with him. So you would think that Doeg is saying all these nice things about David. So encouraging Shaul to hire him. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Kol Pasuk Zel, Amar Doeg El B'Lashon Hara. He meant to point out these fine qualities of David HaMelech in order to bring out a negative thing about David HaMelech, in order to bring out Shaul's jealousy to David HaMelech. And you will see Shaul, in the depression that Shaul had, he was always trying to eventually try to kill David HaMelech. David, when he was working for him. Yedeya Nagin, Sheyedeya Lishal, that he knew how to ask. Gibar, Sheyedeya Lahashiv, he knows how to answer. David HaMelech knew how to ask a question in Torah. He knew how to answer questions in Torah if you asked him. He knew Pilpil. and he knew halacha, and he was keen insight. Hashem imoy, shahalacha kamaisa b'chol malkan. You always paskin like David. He always hit the halacha right on the mark, whether isurim or dinei mamamis. So when Shaul heard all these things about David HaMelech, Shaul was thinking, "Bekula amalu Yonis ben Ikamai." He wasn't turned back because he said, "Yonis, my son, has all these same qualities, so I'm not going to be jealous of David." Came into Amalei, since we'll stop in 2 minutes. Came into Amalei Bashem Imoy. So when Shaul said, when Doeg said Hashem is always with him, in other words, Milsa b'didei loy havabei. That means that he had a certain siyata d'shmaya to always get the halacha right. Chalash daite. Then he felt bad. Shaul felt bad. The Ikanya Bay, and somehow he had this raging anger and jealousy to David. And he ended up hiring him, but as you remember from Tanakh, he always tried to shoot him while he was playing while David was playing the harp. Over David, because B'dushol said V'chol Ashiyifnu Yashia, wherever he turned, Yashia was a bad thing. It means he paskined wrong. Over David said V'chol Ashiyifna, wherever David turned, Yatzliach, he was successful. Now the Gemara asks, Menola de Doeg Hava, how do you know that Doeg was the man that was saying bad things about David? The Ksiv, Yan Echem and Aram, Yuchad Shabenarim. Doeg was the most unique of all the assistants of Shaul HaMelech, and he knew the most Torah, but he had personal character flaws. And the pasuk says, and so he was actually, Doeg was the known person, the big tzaddik, but yet he did tremendous lashon hara, and he caused Shaul so much to get angry, and it was because of him that Shaul killed out Noiv, the city of Noiv, which is a city full of Kahanim. So he murdered his own people. This was all caused by Doeg, the great Torah learner, who, besides his Torah learning, knew how to speak lashon hara in a very duplicitous way, and he was able to bring out the anger of Shaul HaMelech. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Okay. The Gemara continues with the other offspring of Rus that was blessed with 6 brachas, and that is the Mashiach. The pasuk says, "Nachal of Ruach Hashem, Ruach Chachma Ubina, Ruach Eitzah Gvura, Ruach Das V'Yiras Hashem." I guess if you count all these spirits that are resting on the Mashiach, it's going to be the number 6. The Gemara says, There's another pasuk that says that I made him he smelled of Yiras Hashem, of fear of God. What does that mean? Amar Rabbi Alexandri says, Melamin, ditch teaches you, Shet inoi mitzvahs v'yisruim kirachayim. That herichai doesn't mean I made him smell, but I made him like a millstone that was loaded with mitzvahs and suffering like a millstone. So the Mashiach is suffering on behalf of the people, so the people don't have to suffer so much. It's a very interesting concept. So that's a pasuk that describes the Mashiach. Now, the Rava says, the Moirech v'da'ein. It doesn't mean that he's like a millstone. It means that he smells and then he can judge. He smells what's right. One of the things that it says about Mashiach, he's not going to need to see things. And he'll get it right. Why? Because he can be able to smell, and through his Ruach HaKodesh, I guess, he was able to see, to judge a case. Says the Gemara, an example of a false Messiah who did not have this power to judge via smell. Bar Koziva, who was the king of Beitar, he was a Malach Tartan Nishninu Palga. He ruled Beitar for 2.5 years. Amaluhu Rabbanans, the rabbi said, he told the rabbis, I'm the Mashiach. I feel that I'm the Mashiach. Amr Lei b'Mashiach Ksiv. In Mashiach it says, The moirach v'doin. He could smell and judge. If you can smell and judge people, then you must be the Mashiach. That he could not smell and judge. They killed him. And because he was a false prophet. The Neo, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, the Ksiv Behu, they were also, the Neo, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah were also the offspring of David HaMelech, of Rus. The Ksiv Behu, it says, when they were hired for the job to be working in Nebuchadnezzar's court, it says, these people, the Nanya, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, they had no blemishes. They looked good. They had wisdom. They could withstand in the court of the king, to learn books and the language of the Babylonians. So they were hired. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Remember, Daniel was on a business trip when Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah were thrown into the fiery furnace. My Ashe'ein behem komun. What does it mean that they had no blemishes? Which person has no blemishes? That they didn't have any blemish from bloodletting. That's how they were. They didn't have even a scratch on their body. They were perfect. They were perfect humans, so to speak. What does it mean that they had the power to stand in the king's courtyard? What is that referring to? It means they had a good prostrate. They would hold themselves back from laughter, from idle talk, from sleeping. They would be able to stand for a long time without going to the bathroom because of the fear of the king. In other words, they're capable of being at their post and not needing their bodily functions taken care of, so getting in the way. So that's why they were hired for that job. Rabbi said, that all Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah all came from Shevet Yehuda. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Daniel b'nei Yehuda. Only Daniel comes from the family of Yehuda. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, Mishar Shvatim. He argues that Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah come from other Shvatim, and they're not concluded into like the Tana before that said that these are part of the 6 Sa'orim, the 6 great people that came out of Rus. So Yeshaya was prophesying that these people that were taken to be working the courtyard of the king were Sarisim. Sarisim usually could mean they were generals or officers in his army, but Sarisim also has a connotation that they were sterile. My Sarisim, Rav Amma, Sarisim Amish. They were made sterile. They didn't have any children. They couldn't have children because they had to be dedicated for the king. Rabbi Yochanan and Chanina Amar, Chanina says just the opposite. In their days, idol worship became sterile because they were such a tzaddikim. They had such an influence on their generation. Says the Gemara, that Avodah Zarah became sterile. If that's what Sarisa means, and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are called Sarisa because they sterilized Avodah Zarah, then everything makes sense. Hainu D'Ksiv, when they were taken out of the fire, it says they had no blemishes on their body. If you tell me they were sterile, that means they didn't have testicles. When they're taken out of the fire, what do you mean they didn't have any blemishes? They had this blemish that they didn't. They were Sarisim. They were sterile. And says the Gemara, Chavela Denura, they didn't. What it means is that they didn't have any blemishes from the fire. Yes, they were castrated, but they didn't have any blemish from the fire. It says the Gemara, B'Haksib, but it doesn't. Another pasuk says, Reach Nur Loy Adam behind. They didn't have any blemishes from the fire. And says the Gemara, Loy Chavela V'Loy Reicha. They didn't have any blemish or burn marks or any smoke inhalation. That's what the pasuk means. Says the Gemara, Bishlam Amandi Alma Shishtar Avodah Zarah Mehem, that Avodah Zarah became sterile in their days. I need Yosef. That's why what God was so proud. Koyama Hashem, so said Hashem, lo sarisim, to those sarisim, yishmu Shabsosai, that guard my Shabbos, even though they're in a foreign country. So God calls them sarisim. He's proud of them because they sterilized Avodah Zarah with their positive influence on the rest of society. According to the opinion, sarisim mamish, the Chananya and Mishal Zarah were castrated and they were sterile. Why would the Torah label them as such? This is such a degrading term to call them sarisim. It says the Gemara, even if you learn they were sterile, they also sterilized Avodah Zarah. So that's why he agrees that they had an influence on Avodah Zarah, that people should stop worshiping Avodah Zarah in their time. As the Gemara, that God made them sterile. That God says He'll always remember them in my house and in my walls. They'll have a yad v'shem, a hand and a name. That's better than having children, because they didn't have children. But according to the opinion that it means they were sterile, that they sterilized Avodah Zarah, but they did indeed have children. Why does God have to remember them and make them a monument, so to speak, that's better than kids and daughters? They had kids and daughters. Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, they did have children, but Mesun, somehow their children died. What does it mean? God will give them an everlasting name. I'm going to give them an everlasting name that will never be cut. Rav Tamcha said, that God said that there will be a sefer called Daniel that will be always remembered on their name, and therefore they'll always be memorialized in the Jewish world. Okay, we're going to stop over here.